This is Deirdre Wallach, mother of free solo climber Alex Honnold, and you're listening to The Soul of Life.
You probably recognize the voice of Jessica Hansen.
If you listen to broadcast, you hear me blathering on about Atlassian and C3.ai.
She's the one you hear reading NPR's funding credits.
Many people are very surprised to find out that that's a full-time job.
She's also a voice coach for the journalists at NPR. Here she is helping NPR journalist Susan Stamberg with a breathing exercise.
And we're focusing on the ribs that are right under your armpits here. And you should feel those swinging open and closed with this Labrador pant.
Jessica's been a stage and screen actress and has made appearances in HBO's Veep with Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Parks and Rec with Amy Poehler.
They say it will pass, but we'll only get $400 million instead of $900.
Kate works at the Pentagon, and Lacey works for Eric Cantor.
What do you do, Leslie?
I was just recently elected. I'm a councilwoman.
Jessica helps actors and vocal performers develop their voices to stay healthy and make the sounds they want to make. In today's episode of The Soul of Life, I speak with Jessica about how she's helping performers work with new challenges while working from home.
That separation of your home life just doesn't exist now. You know, your kid is in the room with you or your baby's on your lap while we're doing this work. No, you can't curl up in a ball under a bedspread. You can't breathe that way. You can't make sound that way.
Jessica knew she wanted to be an actress since she was age 5. Landing her full-time gig at NPR makes her a very fortunate artist to have work during the pandemic, and she's perfectly fit to make the kind of on-the-fly adjustments needed to keep up with the demands of this news organization with an estimated audience of around 57 million each week.
Predictability makes me crazy. And I know there are a lot of people that love predictability, and that's really stressful. But for me, this part of having to learn how to do my work in a different way has been, it's been kind of invigorating.
What kind of vocal tips does Jessica give to people like Ari Shapiro, Mary Louise Kelly, David Green, or Sylvia Poggioli?
So if you hear somebody whose voice is just really warm and inviting and mellifluous and sonorous, and you just want to like climb up next to them, that's what the really open, released sound is. And if you hear somebody's voice that's just, Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
What's in a voice anyway? Does the way we make the sound of our voice really convey what we think it does?
I think it goes back to Paris Hilton, right? That's hot. That popcorny, gravelly sound. Boomers and Xers think Fry makes you sound less credible, less knowledgeable. Millennials think Fry makes you sound more authoritative, more credible.
We tackle something that any performer or artist wrestles with: how to be more creative.
In this society, we so much prize productivity. It's really hard for some people to sit down for an hour or two and do something frivolous because they equate? Was that a word? They equate frivolity with meaninglessness.
And I share how to untangle yourself from an inner critic that's blocking you from practice, production, and performing at your best. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 6 of The Soul of Life. I'm Keith Miller, and this is At Home in Your Voice with Jessica Hansen. I'm Keith Miller, and my podcast, The Soul of Life, is here to help you remember who you really are. I'll bring together people who have gotten off their treadmills. I'll have conversations with athletes, musicians, doctors, scientists, healers, and entrepreneurs to discuss the fascinating edges of our knowledge in neurobiology, psychology, and physics. This is The Soul of Life. Please take the time now to subscribe to The Soul of Life wherever you're listening. Give it a thumbs up or write a positive review. That's the best way to make sure you don't miss out on these amazing episodes planned for Season 2. Jessica Hansen is the voice of NPR's funding credits and serves as in-house voice coach at NPR headquarters. She has been acting since age 5 and has performed guest star roles on NBC's Parks and Recreation and HBO's Veep, working alongside Amy Poehler and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. She's performed on stages across the country and in dozens of commercials and independent and industrial films. Jessica co-founded Lean and Hungry Theater, which creates podcasts and audio adaptations of Shakespeare and other classics to support teachers and students in the classroom and to make high-quality theater accessible to everyone. It's my distinct privilege to welcome Jessica Hansen. Hey, Jessica, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm good. Just another pandemic Monday morning here.
Yeah, we were just talking about we're in our slippers and pajamas. I'm not going to speak for you, but you can't
sure.
tell what I'm in here, but I'm
definitely yoga pants.
Yeah, yoga pants are making their rounds, right?
Yep.
I'm excited to speak with you. I mean, a lot of people know your voice. Like anyone who listens to NPR hears you, and I'm delighted to talk about your work. When I reached out to you, I told you about my journey recently, kind of getting hit with depression and coming out of that, and sort of why I started this podcast, being able to bring together the ways in which we come to life in our own ways, the ways we reconnect to life and stay vibrant in our work and everything. And can't wait to talk with you about that. And I'm just interested to hear a little bit about what life is like right now, doing your work at NPR during the crisis, during the pandemic.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, everybody's lives have changed so drastically. And working from home to voice funders involved a lot of technical adjustment, but once we figured out how that worked, it was fine. Voice coaching virtually is a totally different ballgame, and it has been a learning curve to try to figure out when I would normally just look at somebody's ribcage to see how they're breathing or look at somebody's body to see where they're holding tension. Now to have to translate to somebody else, I think I'm hearing this. Are you feeling this? Do you feel X? Where do you feel your breath? And so people, I think on the one hand, it's almost better because people have to cultivate their own body awareness and their own awareness of their voices and what they're doing and how they're working, which will get them farther down the road on their own later on. But it certainly is it's a longer road in the beginning just to say, I don't feel anything, Well, how do we get from, I don't know what you're asking me, to, oh yeah, I feel the breath down here in my lower back, So on the one hand, sometimes it's a little frustrating that I can't just see somebody's body or put my hand on their shoulder and say, here.
Right.
But on the other hand, I think the relationship part of it is stronger because they're having to really assess internally what they're doing to make their sound. So it's been a learning curve, which is always good, right? When we stop learning, we stop growing, and
right.
I do look forward to the day that I can be back in a room full of 12 people making lots of sound. But I'm also really enjoying these one-on-one times and finding out, people's lives here are so much more immediate. The commute into an office and then having a work day, that separation of your home life, it just doesn't exist now. Your kid is in the room with you or your baby's on your lap while we're doing this work. And so I've had to really think about where my folks are and ask them, where are you today? How are you feeling? The headlines don't stop. And these are mostly journalists and, assess, take their temperature. How much can we push today? How much can we really push the edges and the boundaries and really dig deep and explore? And how much does it have to be, okay, let's just work on breathing deeply today because we just got to take care of you and help you be the best you that you can be today. Right. So it's been a lot more personal in some ways, even though we're virtual instead of in person.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying we've had to innovate. You've had to innovate and develop ways in which to get closer. We still need that closeness with people in the work that we do. And if you're a coach, you need that contact, that sensory awareness of their space. So you have to find ways to kind of put that into words, maybe almost, and innovate. And it's challenging, isn't it? Like people are stressed to the max. I know that's
people are.
What I'm hearing. Yeah.
Yeah, people are really stressed, but people have also found, remarkable ways to adapt. My folks are used to going into most of them are used to going to a beautiful studio that's, fully soundproofed and they know which buttons to push. And then they all came home. And, in many cases, 4 or 6 months later, we were still talking about, no, you can't curl up in a ball under a bedspread. You can't breathe that way. You can't make sound that way.
Right.
So a lot of my work became sort of pseudo-engineering, like how do we create your home studio space so that you can still make your best sound, which also, not my field, had to sort of innovate a little bit.
Right.
How can we get your anatomy, your windpipe structured in a healthy way so that you can create sound and that you don't get stiff and sore and miserable.
Right.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, but I thrive on variety and I thrive on growth and change, and I love that. Predictability makes me crazy. And I know there are a lot of people that love predictability, and that's really stressful. But for me, this part of having to learn how to do my work in a different way has been it's been kind of invigorating, because how I help people is in a new format. And so that only makes me more valuable later, if I know how to solve problems in 12 ways instead of 6.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It almost seems like you're built for this type of thing. And I'm hearing people kind of fall into 2 categories in my practice as people come in to, asking for help with what they're going through the pandemic. Either some people are just relieved that everyone else is finally like the way they've been, like they don't want to go out and stressed out by people.
Yes.
And so they're happy to be in their closet or whatever it is
Yes.
they do when they're supposed to be working at home. And then other people who are just like, wow, like, this is an opportunity. There's a chance here to do something new. And so it sounds like you're in that category. I wonder, can you share with people kind of what some of the boring stuff is? I mean, I know you're, it's not all putting out fires and like there must be a routine for what you do, obviously, and maybe explain to people what you do for NPR.
Right. So the majority of my job is the funding credits. So recording them is a part of it. Many people are very surprised to find out that that's a full-time job.
Yeah,
and
right.
in fact, we have 3 voices and 2 full-time producers. It's more than one full-time job. It's a team of full-time jobs.
Who are the other voices? Because people would recognize them.
Sure. Choki Hansen does the newscasts on broadcast, and he does the digital, and Kara Stevens does the digital as well. So if you listen to a podcast or you listen online, you'll hear one of those guys. But if you listen to broadcast, you hear me blathering on about Atlassian and C3.ai.
Here it is. I mean, it makes you have such a golden, wonderful voice. I have to admit, like, I understand why they chose you and not like Al Franken to do the voice. But, like,
poor Al.
I love him.
Well, this is what I tell my clients. I mean, thank you. But I worked on this. I didn't sound like this 15, 20 years ago. When I started graduate school, my voice was very flat and my jaw was very tight. My speech teacher would probably tell you that my jaw is still too tight. But, it's something that you work at. And so many people come to me and say, I know my voice is just my voice and there's nothing I can do about it, but I wish I could sound fill in the blank. And I'm like, but you can do that. You can change which tones you're choosing, and you can expand your range of colors, and you can choose, I want to sound more warm and more soothing for this piece, and now I want to sound more bright and peppy for this piece. And so I think what thrills me about this work is really the ability to empower people and invigorate people to have choices. But back to the funding credits, which was your question. Depending on how busy it is, how many new clients we have in any given week, how much new copy we have from existing clients, I maybe am actually recording the funding credits anywhere from 3 to 7 hours. And then the rest of the time, there's the team of us prepping the scripts, looking for, ones that I've recorded before that we don't have to redo, making changes. The clients, make changes all the time. They decide, we don't want to promote this product, or, when the pandemic started, we did nothing but make changes for 3 weeks. Everybody wanted to pull their existing
every
messages.
Script was out the window.
Exactly, because it was tone deaf. And so everybody wanted to put on something like, in this uncertain time, you can count on us to fill in the blank. And then there's a lot that goes into making sure the files are right at the end of the week, and making sure that they are all exported out properly so that we can deliver them to the shows and the stations. And then we turn around and start doing it all over again. It's a week-long process, starting Monday morning with script prep and ending Friday afternoon.
A lot of people come up to me because I'm a clinical psychology person and do psychotherapy and counseling. Or I get the sense that even if they don't tell me, sometimes they tell me, like friends will say, like, are you constantly thinking about like whether I had issues with my mother and, in childhood? And, like, the truth is no, like I'm off duty. I'm always telling people I'm off duty, but the truth is like once we do have an instinct, and, in my case, it was an instinct to be a healer and a kind of a spiritual person. And then of course went out and got training. And then my story, realizing that all of that training, and then of course, pursuit of a living, making money. And I want to talk to you about that too. That begins to weigh us down, and we lose sight of, or lose connection to that core, maybe that spiritual core that we had that sort of just was a calling and just an instinct for us. And, I guess the truth is I do notice things about, people. And I wonder for you, like, do you notice, like, can you tell what's going on, or do you get curious? Does that curiosity get started when you hear somebody's voice and it's doing something? Like, what are those things that you might respond to internally and have to say, like, okay, this is a person I don't know, I'm not going to coach them, or I don't know if you have that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of times I'm in the former camp that you described. I'm not on duty, and so I'm thinking more about content than form when most people talk to me. But absolutely, there are extraordinary voices, and sometimes somebody will have something so unusual or unique that I just can't help think, what is that? How is that getting made? And I think sometimes the same is true if I notice that this is probably true for you too, that if I notice that somebody's especially shut down or guarded, or their voice is particularly held or tight or gripped, that there's some sort of real, I almost want to say hurt. There's some reason that they're holding themselves back. There's some reason somewhere. That they're, like there was some sort of trauma or some sort of belief that they weren't enough or good enough or shouldn't be heard. And so in those moments, I think, I think what happened, and I just want them to open. It almost, that's the only thing people often ask me, like, whose voice do you love or whose voice do you not love? And I think more than any one person, it's when I hear something that's really just constricted and held and tight, that I just want it to be open and free, and I want to release all the guardedness and all the whatever it is, all the tension. I just want to grab that person and clear it off them, help them open.
And for people who are listening and wondering, what in the world are we talking about? Like some people may wonder, like, how can you tell there's any, like, it's just a voice, like there's nothing, like, right? But like, can you bring people into like what you mean by hearing that somebody's voice may be constrained or they're holding back? What does that sound like?
Yeah, so I'm going to see if I can maybe. So if you, I'm going to start in the opposite of there. Mm-hmm. So if you hear somebody whose voice is just really warm and inviting and mellifluous and sonorous, and you just want to like climb up next to them, that's what the really open, released sound is. Mm-hmm. And if you hear somebody's voice that's just flat, or I wonder if I can even. So let's take like Mary Had a Little Lamb. So you think of like James Earl Jones saying Mary had a little lamb, or David Green, Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, it's going to be all big and open and yummy and you just want to swim in it, it's molasses and honey. And then if somebody's closed off, maybe it's more like Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. And you can hear that there's tension and there's tightness and there's constriction, and I just want to open it. Come out, whoever you are, I want to see you.
You're talking about range and variation, the ups, the downs. It's not just a monotone.
Yeah.
It's like almost a song. Or even people have, I notice my voice, right? Sort of like when something happens in the body, the voice sort of responds.
Well, and that's true. When people are naturally excited, the voice goes up, oh my gosh, can you believe this just happened? And when people are angry, when people are pretending to be angry, it does a very different thing than when people are actually angry. When people are actually enraged, their voices open and get very round and full, and the full power is coming out. When people are pretending to be angry, they like clench their jaws and talk through gritted teeth. But I was going to ask you this because I think that when people read, that's happening in one part of the brain. And when people speak, speech comes from a different part of the brain. And so I think when people are trying to read scripts for a podcast or, a presentation or on air or, public speaking, I think that people are operating from their reading brain and they wonder why they don't sound like they're just talking. And I think it's because there's two different parts of the brain. And so my job is to get people to pretend they're talking while they're reading. And that's the trick.
Yeah. Key word I think you use there is pretend. Like I think when we are able to either envision and have an image in our head or empathize, that does create it calls on the right brain, as opposed to the left brain. And the left brain is logical, and the left brain is responsible for language. And that can be a little confusing because, well, if the left brain is logical, why is something as abstract as language, why is that function done in the left brain? So it really starts to break down. And this idea of right and left brain even is sort of a mythology that there are systems. And I think it's just a helpful metaphor that we use, right and left brain, because it's more about integration. I think to your point about when somebody's reading, if usually what we can tell is if there is an agenda and there's anxiety and stress, I mean, usually when we want something to happen, then our creative range is shorter. We are narrowing down to an expectation. And I think the body responds to that also.
That's so interesting. I think, so two things most voice teachers always start with the body. We always start with stretching and releasing and opening and getting the blood flowing, because you have to make space for the breath to move, and then you can put the voice on top of the breath. But the other thing is about this left brain, right brain idea and the expectations, because I think people come to me with an expectation that there's a right way to read a script or be a host or whatever. And so they want to get better. I hear get better all the time. Yeah. How do I get better? And I think the answer is never, you're at step 1 and I need you to get to step 3. It's always, how do we soften your body more? How do we get your breath stronger and more breath control? And how do we build your range and your awareness of your range so that then you can choose from more options to create whatever you want? It's like Bob Ross and the happy little clouds and the happy little trees, right? There's no right or wrong way to make the painting with your voice. It's just...
By the way, that's Bob Ross.
Really?
Yeah.
It's great.
I don't usually get to call it out, but...
There you go. See? It's kismet.
Yeah, exactly. And funny story about Bob Ross, like this is secondhand. I don't know what the source is, like, so I have to ask people to sort of kind of look for the source. But he was in the Air Force and he was a drill instructor. Right?
Really?
So he spent a lot of time, and he, apparently he said, after he came out of that experience, he said, "I'm never going to raise my voice in anger again." And so what you see, right, in that, this, and he's now a meme, right? He's so much more than a meme. He's a, and we actually, my son was into him for a while and kind of watching, and they have a place in Northern Virginia where they send out art supplies, and we actually went by and looked inside and saw, oh yeah, there's the all the art supplies. So something about like the idea of saying I'm never going to raise my voice again, that almost strikes me as though when you hear him, and of course this is armchair psychoanalysis here, but
yeah.
Here goes. I mean, like, but when you hear him, you can hear it. So almost sounds like, well, he's gone really over into the other side.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Pendulum swung
but that's an
all
interesting
the way.
story.
And he's
Right.
so specifically chosen this very soothing, very quiet, good for napping voice
Yes.
that it's crazy. I mean, he didn't just say, "I'm not going to raise my voice." He went all the way in the other direction.
Right.
He doesn't even talk as loud as you and I are talking right now.
No, right. So you might almost say, I wonder if you'd say there isn't a range. Like in his case, it's so soft, and it's almost, and of course it's art. And so I'm not here to say that he shouldn't have done that. Like that's just that's the medium he chose, and he wanted to be. I mean, even, and I wonder, performers, you would know more about this, but like they decide their character is going to be a set, like Stephen Colbert when he was in character for his Colbert Report. Like, that was, people thought he was being just his stand-up thing, but that was his, that was a character he built. So I imagine that comes with it. Have you been able to witness that? You've also you've pursued acting. Have you seen that in that arena?
Sure. I think what you said about Bob Ross, in this very tight range that he's chosen, a low volume and the soothing quality. And within that, he's got pitch range, and he's got this specific range of moods that he allows, delight at one moment, comforting you to make sure that you understand you don't have to do it his way. You can do it whichever way you want. So there's that empowering. He's got this little painter's palette of moods that he uses, but it's very specific. And I think that's what every actor at least strives to do. But I think we're all trying to create somebody that is real, somebody that is three-dimensional and has challenges and strengths, and portraying that. My favorite living actress is Cate Blanchett, because she can so completely transform herself. You wouldn't recognize her from Elizabeth to The Gift. She's so good at transforming herself, and she's amazing on stage too. And so she's choosing a range of physical gestures, her ways of responding to the other characters, her vocal choices, her dialect choices. But it's still a three-dimensional whole person. It's not, it doesn't feel limited, but each one is so different that it must be limited, right?
It must be hard. I wonder, like from stage to camera, right? Some people maybe can just do that, and they have the range to just make that change. But what's the difference?
Yeah, stage involves you being large. You have to start from your core, and all of your gestures have to be enough that the person in the last row can see you. So you do have to adjust for the size of your space. If you're in an amphitheater, it's different from being in a black box, and you learn that. That's what training is for. Camera, something so small, something so little, somebody moves their eyes, and you can read a thought, Somebody maybe goes from a smile to a tight smile, something so tiny. And on stage, you have to do all of that, and you have to do all of that honestly, but it's not focused for this tiny little receptor that is the camera. It's much more. It's much bigger and has to have more power behind it, more physical power. You have to have more vocal power to carry your voice to the back of the house. Although there's a raging debate going on right now about how theaters are using microphones.
Oh, you mean
and the voice
overusing them?
teachers are all. Well, the voice teachers, some of them are purists and don't want any microphones in the house because people can use their voices. And some people say, look, they're hanging way up from, they're hanging way up from the rafters, and so it's just amplifying the sound. And we need for the people who are hard of hearing, and it's an ongoing debate. And I think it makes sense to continue to train actors as though there were not microphones, and so that they, when the sound system goes out, the show must go on. But also, we have technology, and so let's use it to.
Yeah.
I was going to say amplify. Let's use it to amplify our purposes. I didn't mean that to be a pun.
Exactly. Right. It's probably like the debate in sports of instant replay. Like, well, of course we want to know more. We want to know the exact, precise. Did the ball touch the line or not? But then once you're in the experience of that technology, the aesthetic of the technology is like, we're all just twiddling. Like we're like now secondhand to the technology as we wait for this result. It almost takes the spontaneity out, or I don't know, takes the range out.
And you want to know that the refs are right. You want the refs to be, you want them to have an eagle eye, and you want them to be right. And then does the instant replay take away from our belief in their skill set or their authority?
Right. Yeah, there's a They're performing also. They're athletes a lot of the most of the time too. So, I want to ask you about the problems that people have with their voices. My son is really interested in linguistics, and he's an avid reader, and so he's learning Japanese and very interested in tonal languages. And he came to me the other day and he said, I just thought of this. He said, Dad, because he took some voice lessons at one point. We were working on singing, and he's like, frying is supposed to happen. Like it's a normal expression that we can like languages use that. I was like, well, I don't know. I'll ask Jessica.
I mean, anthropologically, it's fascinating. There's some cultures and languages that use the clicking, and there are different kinds of clicking, so many different kinds that our ear probably can't distinguish between them. And the fry, it's its own register. We have 4 registers in our voices, and fry is the lowest one. It's
we
a
should
whole
explain
register.
what that is for people, or maybe demonstrate.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's that popcorny, gravelly sound, which whenever people talk about fry, they always, well, not always, but a lot of people reference the Kardashians. And I just have to say, the other day I heard an interview with Kim Kardashian, and there was not an ounce of fry in her voice the whole time. She had beautiful command of her tone and her breath support and her power, and she gave nothing away. Nothing was wasted. So I'll have to find a better example. But there is, especially in the millennial generation, fry, they don't even hear it. It's just a part of that generation's culture of expression. It's normal for them. Boomers and Xers are like, oh my God, make it stop.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting how that came about culturally.
Why do we do it?
Right. Well, I just saw a study the other day that said boomers and Xers think fry makes you sound less credible, less knowledgeable. Oh. Millennials think fry makes you sound more authoritative, more credible. So I think it depends on who you want to reach. And in my case, fry is created by the vocal folds sort of banging against each other instead of lining up nicely like they do when you're using whole tone. And so some people, when those vocal folds are flapping together, they can create little calluses and nodes, and some people require surgery for that. And I want people's voices to be healthy. So I try to teach people to use whole tone for that reason, and also because I'm teaching voice for people who are using their voices professionally, and the end goal is communication and to use your whole voice. You're heard better. When you're talking back here, there's just less tone, and so the voice just doesn't carry. But if you're talking out here, there's more sound, and you can see it on the recording. You can see the sound wave when I'm talking here. It's going to be huge.
Wide.
And then when you talk in Fry, it's going to be really small down here.
Right. And of course, there's the aesthetic of it. There's the
people think it sounds cool, that you're laid back and you don't care. You're super cool. And I think it goes back to Paris Hilton, right? That's hot.
Exactly.
And so when we hear that sort of like, oh my God, that's so hot, we're like, okay, that's that. Yeah. We have that archetype in our heads of like the cool party girl.
How do you stay interested and vibrant in your work? I mean, we've talked about for you, this was a calling, but what about people for which, it's more of a grind, the work that they're doing is a grind, or they're looking for work, right? Being out of work. I mean, I don't know if you can speak to your experience about finding the job security that you have, right? Which is amazing, but there's people out there, actors, actresses that don't have that. I think, what would you say to them?
So I think it was probably the first month I was in graduate school. One of my classmates asked one of our faculty, how do you stay artistically alive when you're not in a show? And this is the problem for actors. If you're a singer, you can sing every day in your own home. You can keep your instrument in shape. If you play the violin, same thing. But it's like, if you're an actor, it's a collaborative process, and you can read plays and you can work on monologues, but you can't have that in real time, responding in the moment to what somebody else is giving you and having a true reaction based on a character that you've created. It's always the actor's challenge. This time is especially insane because it's all the actors and the singers and the symphonies and the stagehands and the lighting designers and the set designers and
the whole industry.
The industry of the performing arts. And so, a lot of people have done fundraisers and donated to funds, but an actor sitting at home, many actors have developed other things, though, to feed their souls.
Please take the time now to subscribe to The Soul of Life wherever you're listening. Give it a thumbs up or write a positive review. That's the best way to make sure you don't miss out on these amazing episodes planned for season 2.
Many actors also play an instrument or play basketball, something else that they do creatively. They love cooking. I was never that fortunate. I was an actor who loved acting, and I didn't have hobbies. I had a calling, as you said, and that was all my spirit ever wanted. So I feel exceedingly fortunate that I have found a full-time job that pays me to use some of my skill set on a regular basis. I mean, that doesn't happen. That's insane. On the other hand, 80% of my job is this, funding credits production stuff that is same after, week after week. And so I am often challenged with that, pandemic or no. How do you stay creatively alive? And one thing that a lot of artists do, and a lot of non-artists do, is The Artist's Way. Do you know this book by Julia Cameron?
No.
It's a book it's a 12-step program for recovering creativity. Oh. So it works you through 12 steps of recovering your sense of self, your identity. There's a lot of work, but there are these tasks at the end of the chapter that prompt you to think about who you are, what you want. They make you do creative things. Write a letter to yourself at 80. Write a letter from yourself at 80 to you when you were 8. And talk about, what's important in your life. And so it's sort of an inward journey of discovery of who I am. And the other component of this that's amazing is you're supposed to take your inner artist on dates, just you and your artist. And you can do anything as long as it's frivolous and playful. So you can do finger painting. You can go for a walk with a camera and pretend you're a photographer. You can watch your favorite movie from when you were 10. It doesn't matter. You can paint your toenails a different color. It doesn't, as long as it's
no
silly
rules.
and frivolous.
Right.
And it sounds to, in this society, we so much prize productivity. It's really hard for some people to sit down for an hour or two and do something frivolous because they equivalent? Is that a word? They equate frivolity with meaninglessness. Right. And instead, when you sit down to do something intentionally frivolous, you feed your creative self. You feed your artist self. Right. So that has been my stump speech for the past 4 months while I've been doing this process, that I think I'm not a painter. I will never be a painter. But I got down on the floor with a roll of butcher paper and some finger paints, and I had the time of my life, and I made something that gives me joy. And it's never going to be framed in a museum, but it gives me joy, and I made it, and it was fun to do. And that's what we're here for, right? That's why we were put on the planet, was to figure out who we are and express ourselves. The existential questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And for artists, you can read a novel, write a song, learn to play the guitar. It's not maybe acting or stage, set design or whatever your primary field is, but you do have to keep nurturing your artist in some way.
Yeah.
And then, of course, a lot of artists have figured out ways around the pandemic problem. There are Zoom plays, and somebody's invented this software that symphonies can play together again. Somebody's, jiggering the delays to line them all up. And so people are being innovative and finding ways to create their own art. But definitely some days I wish I was just a potter, and I didn't need anyone or anything else to do my art. I could just throw pots all day.
Right.
That'd be great.
The truth of it is, like, because those of us who are working with people, and performance is working with people, it's like you have parts of yourself that can get burnt out and not believe that it's worth performing, or not believe that it's worth the energy expense of being yourself, right? And so you see that withdrawing from things, and you see people complain about negative thoughts, critical thoughts. The inner critic is a big one for people who are creative or want to be more creative. I'm always telling them, that critic is a protective part of us, that it's there trying to help us, and sometimes it's not good enough to just say put it aside, because they can't put it aside. It comes right back. So often we're trying to help them work with it creatively, and like, oh, what does this critic look like? Well, it looks like, a big fiery volcano. Oh, okay, great. All of a sudden now you're in your right brain with your imaginative brain with the inner critic. So something is now beginning to move.
That's interesting. Yeah. I love the the inner critic is it's so pervasive. We get hurt or stunted, or somebody tells us that's not good when you do that in some way. And so we put up that protective wall and say, don't do that, shame on you, don't do that. And you're absolutely right. If you just say, oh, don't listen to that, it doesn't go anywhere. You have to look it in the eye and say, what is this? Where did it come from? Why is it in me? Yeah. And once you've done that, it's almost like throwing the bucket of water on the Wicked Witch of the West. You look at it, and as soon as you're like, oh, that's all that was. I don't need that.
So true.
Just because
That's
that boy when I was 16 told me that I only got in choir because I was pretty, that doesn't mean I can't sing. He was mean.
Yeah.
He was mean.
Yeah, right.
I don't need to carry his thing around with me for the rest of my life.
And then, like, I would say to that part of you that is holding on to that memory, right? If this was a person coming and saying, this is what's stopping me. I've got this critic. I've got this memory of, I'm only good if I'm pretty or something. Well, then what does she look like, and how do you feel towards her right now? Or what does he look like? What does that critic look like? And using those prompts of visualization, I think you do this. Clearly, when you're working with somebody, you respond to their cues and then you prompt them. And sometimes we need those prompts to get out of the rut we're in. We need, there's not a right answer here. What am I feeling? Oh, okay, well, what's coming to me is like, well, she looks like her hair is kind of frazzled. Okay, great. Well, how do you feel towards her? I want to help her out. Maybe I'll give her a comb. Okay, great. Now she's smiling now.
Yeah.
So this happens.
Yeah, we're in the
our
same
thought
business.
life.
We're in the business of helping people be bigger, better versions of themselves. It's
Right.
and it's truly, truly rewarding and fulfilling when somebody has that aha moment, when somebody says, "Oh, that's all I had to do. That's so easy." Yes. Yes.
Right.
It's good.
It's great. I'm glad to hear what brings you joy, Jessica Hansen, and during this pandemic. I mean, people are hearing you every day, so I hope now they have a sense of the dimension and the character and the person that's behind the voice on NPR if they're listening.
Thank you for this interview.
Thanks for listening to The Soul of Life. This is Keith Miller. Oh, and don't forget, please leave a thumbs up or a like for this episode wherever you're listening so that others like you may find the soul of life. I mean, really, it's not every day you get to share the soul of life with someone. Okay, so you can post a comment or question on souloflifeshow.com. I'd love to hear from you. And please subscribe now to get the next episode. I look forward to sharing more of my soul of life with you.
I like it, and it's not harsh to my eardrum.
All right, I will go.